Good day and welcome to Our Power is Within. I am your host, Chaz Smith, aka Just Chaz. And I am on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. For those of you who are new to the show, welcome and thank you for being here. And for those who have been following along, I thank you so much for your continued support. If you would like to help me spread this message, some simple ways to do this are by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or taking a moment and scrolling down and clicking the 5-star rating if you feel I've earned it, or even sharing an episode with a friend or maybe your favorite episode on your social media. And if you share it on Instagram, you can tag me at Our Power is Within. So I have to ask, did you make that commitment to yourself last week and wake up every day, smile, and say to yourself, today is going to be a great day? And if so, how did it go for you? Did you notice a difference? And if not, don't lose faith. Just continue to persist and trust that over time you will feel the difference and see the difference as you build new beliefs and new pathways in your brain. For today's and this week's challenge, I am using a fun suggestion from our guest David Rahman from episode 21, who taught us to look every day into the mirror, into our own eyes and soul, and say, I love you, I value you, I respect you. David's suggestion is to do this 3 times a day, but I'm all about baby steps. So even if you do it once per day, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a high five, and acknowledge how awesome you were for showing up for yourself that day. Because listen, I know that mirror work is not always easy or comfortable at first. But hey, just to point it out, there's always a mirror in our bathrooms, so you can make a nice simple goal and make it your mission to just do this whenever you go to the restroom and while you're washing your hands. And honestly, isn't this approach so much better than what we usually find ourselves doing on default mode when we look in the mirror, which is often judging our imperfections or finding our flaws? So I really encourage you to do this for yourself, an act of love, because love is a verb. And have fun with it, and let me know how it goes. And speaking of fun, our today's guest is actually really fun. Her name is Michelle Thomas Wiegers. And today Michelle shares with us a bit about her testimonial and her healing journey, what the catalyst for her healing really was, and the tools that she found most helpful along the way. As well, Michelle also shares with us all the wisdom that she gained through her journey. Michelle is a poet, and my favorite part of our chat today is Michelle sharing with us all about how tapping into her creative side was a huge element for her healing. We talk about how healing brings out our creative nature, and that then the more we experience our creative nature, the more we heal. So basically there's this idea, well, there's this reality, or in my experience and her experience and so many others, where the healing and the creativity are intertwined. I get it. Some of you might be saying, well, I'm not a creative person, but we are all creative. We were born creative. We are creative. Michelle talks about this, about being a creative child and what happens as we become an adult, but we're all creative. We get to express and explore our creativity in so many different outlets. So don't get caught up on thinking it has to be painting or poetry or writing or playing an instrument, because the opportunities for creating is endless. And on a side note, don't forget, we're all creating every day, consciously or by consciously and by design or by default. So we're creating our life that we're living and our well-being and everything all around us. So not to get super sidetracked, but on any account, we are all creative, and we get to chat a lot about how creativity and healing are intertwined, which is, like I said, like my favorite part of this whole episode, because I love talking about creativity. So also, Michelle was really awesome enough to share a really beautiful poem that she wrote that was inspired by her and through her healing journey. And through her healing experience and the knowledge that she gained, she has now developed her own coaching practice, coaching group classes for supporting people on their journeys. She has expanded her life coaching practice to also include mind-body healing work. And she has done some of these group trainings independently as well as in collaboration with other lovely ladies, which I love hearing about people doing collaborations. It makes me so happy. There's so much power in numbers. If Michelle's message resonates with you and you've been looking for community support yourself in this journey, she does actually have another group session that begins, I want to say, February 8th. So there's still plenty of time for you to join that group and take part in the journey together. Links will be in show notes. And lastly, I am super stoked because Michelle actually shares some really exciting new news with us today that she hasn't really shared with many people yet. And that message is that she is starting a really powerful, awesome online healing community platform where we will be able to join for free. And it will be a host that brings many wonderful tools and many wonderful people together so that we can all navigate this world together. And the link for that will also be in the show notes. So I hope that you enjoy today's chat. All right, you guys, I have Michelle on the line. Michelle, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Chaz. This is great to be here with you.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to just have this space where you can unpack your story and share it with people. I know that I've personally been really excited to hear more ever since I saw your one impromptu video on your website. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and let you have the floor pretty quick here. And what I would love is if for the listeners, you could share a little bit about who you are and kind of what led you up to this point. You know, you could maybe tell us about like what diagnoses or symptoms that led you into this search for healing, and then share with us the magic of what worked along the way.
Sounds great. So I'm Michelle Wiegers. I'm a life coach and mind-body coach. I work with individuals, and now I teach online courses as well. And I've really committed my life work to seeing others heal. I truly believe that's possible for so many of us that I'm just doing all that I can to put beautiful work into the world in order to create, really the way I see it is I'm an opener. I create openings for people. So there's not exactly one thing that will work for everyone. But so for me, as I looked into sharing today, like really the way that I can start my story is I experienced an adverse childhood experience where I was hurt by someone I should have been able to trust. And in that deep wounding place, I know now, I didn't know then, or even in the last decades of suffering with chronic pain, but I really had this belief the world is not a safe place and the people in it can't be trusted. And without knowing it, I literally had this inner conclusion about my life, others, myself, even my relationship to my body that was based on that wounding experience. And those limiting beliefs really kept me bound up. So what I was bound up in is I had IBS as a child from a very young age. I had back and foot pain in high school that really plagued me. I was finally diagnosed with IBS in college. And I graduated college in 99. So just out of college, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and really spent a number of years of just trying to manage chronic pain, dramatic fatigue, several naps a day kind of experience of living, and really trying to learning to like manage my life around those symptoms. I went to all of the modalities that everyone's gone to in search for help, right? And in 2016, so fast forwarding through a lot of years there, this is just a brief history, but I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic condition that's it causes hypermobility in the connective tissues of your body. And so when I had that diagnosis, I was like, I finally understood why everything was happening the way it was in my body. And yet what happened is after that diagnosis, I had this huge downward spiral. And at that point, I moved from being able to get around to needing to rely on a cane to walk. I was considering at that point getting on disability. I was pretty well housebound. I couldn't go to stores or friends' houses or, all of the things. I was home all the time. And side note, I have 4 kids. So like I had all of them they were all old enough at that point. Thankfully, they weren't like baby and toddlers at that point. But it was a really difficult experience for us as a family, for me as an individual, especially for my husband, relying on him exponentially more than any human being should have to rely on someone else. And then I was diagnosed with POTS at Dartmouth-Hitchcock in 2017. So I had experienced a lot of dizziness upon standing. Sometimes if I bent over, I would be so dizzy I'd fall over. I had shortness of breath various times and got that diagnosis. So again, it was just like this journey of getting diagnosed here and there and everywhere with all these different long lists of symptoms. And it wasn't until I learned, I have a really good friend from a community that I used to live in, and she reached out to me, and she's like, she and I were we called ourselves the health twins. Like we had the same story. She had chronic fatigue, she had fibromyalgia, she had IBS, she had the chronic pain. Then when I was diagnosed with EDS, she was diagnosed with POTS. And then when I was diagnosed with POTS, she was diagnosed with EDS. So like literally we had all the things together. And she reached out and she said, Michelle, I want to let you know I'm better. And I was like, what the heck? That's not possible. You're better. So that started me on the journey to like try to figure out what this was that helped my friend heal. So that brings you up to the point of in my story where I really, at that point, right before my friend contacted me, I had just been measured for a wheelchair because I just was so housebound. And I live in southern Vermont. I love being outdoors in nature and hiking or just in the woods. And my husband and I decided, and my practitioner, that I really needed a chair to support me, to support my everyday life. And so I've been measured for that wheelchair. And I came to this point where I just reached my end. I had tried so many different things. And I finally decided, like, it's time to stop fighting against my body, treating my body like an enemy, which it felt like it was. And I need to just get to a place of acceptance. I'm disabled. That's who I am. And so it just was like a point of surrender. And it's really interesting that it wasn't until that point of surrender that then my friend shared with me. And not that she had any idea. We weren't in touch, honestly. So she didn't have any idea where I was at that point. But her story gave me this opening. Like I mentioned before, I really love that idea of creating openings for others towards healing, for healing. And her story gave me this belief, this like window into like, okay, if she healed this way, maybe I can heal, even though this sounds crazy. So that power of her story, she had used Dr. Howard Schuberner's book, Unlearn Your Pain, and also sent me various resources, YouTube links like Dr. Sarno's 2020 episode about healing chronic back pain, Lorimer Mosley's TED Talk on pain, Schuberner's lectures. So I watched these various pain science resources that my friend shared with me. And I kind of just sat stunned in disbelief, like this can't be what's caused my decades, pretty much my whole life, symptoms going, like wreaking havoc in my body, feeling like I was a slave to the dictator that lived inside me. And it was pain. And it wasn't just pain. It was beyond just physical pain. It was all the symptoms I listed. And so, but at that point, like I said, I think I had gotten to that place of surrender. I was just desperate. I had come to my end and I was ready to consider it. And I remember, I'll never forget sharing with my husband that night at dinner. I was like, my friend reached out. This is what she said. What do you think? And he looked at me and he's like, I'm not going to keep you from investigating it for yourself. Of course, he said, but I cannot hope one more time. We've been through so many times where we thought this was the thing that would work. And he said, I want to hope with you, but I've just accepted you're disabled. And so I can't get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I know we all kind of get that place where we're like, I don't want to be hopeful one more time. But now you also have like your partner who's also felt like, that hope was dismantled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was.
So your friend literally, like, that was it. She did unlearn your pain and that was her solution.
She worked with she went to an integrative medicine center, which I always say, like, it's, 1 foot in Western medicine, 1 foot in Eastern medicine. And the practitioner that she saw there, which was an MD, but / naturopath, right? He really identified for her that he, knew about Schubiner and Schubiner's approach. I think he had been trained by Schubiner, possibly. I don't remember the details of that, but yeah. So for her, working through that book and using, I think she actually dove a little bit into the TMS Wiki, the healing program that they have on there that Alan Gordon wrote. So that was like the beginning, but she went into all the resources for herself and really healed herself and was like, Michelle has to know about this. We are the health twins. Like, it's gotta be something if it's gonna help me, it's gonna help her.
Yeah. And she probably wanted to know it worked before she told you.
Well, we had been out of touch because I no longer lived in Tennessee where she lived. And at the time I lived in Vermont. And so when she reached out to me, it was definitely out of the blue, like a friend from the past, So she had been healed at that point, I think, for 3 or 4 months. So.
Oh, wow. And so it's funny because you said that when she first told you about all this stuff and you first kind of learned about it, you were kind of taken back, almost not necessarily instantly believing that was your, the reason. And It's funny because so many people read a book by Dr. Sarno. And I know my experience was oh my God, this was written about me. Shit, this is 100% this is it, because this book was written for about me. So I felt so instantly certain that was what was going on.
Yeah. Chas, the way that I describe it is I believe for myself, TMS diagnosis was one that came with so much heaviness. It was are you freaking kidding me? I put my family through 20 years of hell because I had something emotionally repressed inside, and I could have healed. I could have been present for my kids in a different way. All the losses that I had to face and accept, right? With this TMS diagnosis, it's not always roses. When you first find out about it, you're like, wait, no, it couldn't be, because I can't accept that I had the power to do something about this. And it's plagued my freaking life, right?
I get that. I do see how that could be the experience initially, until you realize, okay, this means though that now I have the power to shift the trajectory,
Absolutely.
But yeah, I can totally see that. To just be well, it is hard to say, wow, okay. This all happened and everyone went through this with me, and this all happened because of, something as simple as emotions.
Yeah.
Not simple, but simple. Yeah.
For me, I described it like it was a devastating diagnosis with a whole heck of a lot of hope. So it was devastating because of the past, but there was so much opening for me for the future. And that's where that belief, I really believe in the power. I'm so glad you have this podcast, because I believe in the power of stories and how that makes a way for opening for people to heal. So it's not that made me pause. I dove in. I mean, I'm a dive in the deep end kind of person, all about it. So I dove into everything. But the initial step was like a lot of fear around it. But yeah, within the matter of, I think it was probably one weekend, I, read and watched and listened to so many things, like a lot of the resources I already mentioned and more. And I'll never forget, I had spent a year, because of my hypermobility, my PT had me wearing an SI belt because I had horrible debilitating sciatica and sciatic pain. And so I had this belt that I wore under my clothes. Actually, it was probably 10 months, 11 months, or potentially maybe it was a year long that I had worn this thing. And I'll never forget, after these I think it was after Schubiner's like lecture series that he has on his website, I got a shower and I was like getting dressed and I like reached for that belt and I was like, no, I'm done. And I chucked the thing across the room. I was like, I'm done. I'm not relying on all these other things anymore. So there's definitely a turning point for me. The pain science gave me that, like, this is me. I finally see that what's actually been happening. So I can totally relate to you in that when you read Sarno's book and you felt like it was a mirror, right, for your own story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because his book just goes into all the personality traits, and I'm like, I'm every one of these personalities.
Yeah.
But I can also relate to and I know so many people can relate to like throwing that belt, I mean, I know so many people are like, I threw all those damn mobility tools in the garbage. Mm-hmm. And just like, I'm done with all these things,
Right. Exactly.
What was then, like, how did you, so the first steps kind of immersing yourself in all the learning, soaking all in the knowledge, like mm-hmm. getting as much information as you can. And then what steps did you really take? What was your path? What did you follow?
Right. So the pain science gave me like some immediate realization of what was actually happening. And that, I tend to be an analytical / emotional person. So like, I want to understand, and then I have to connect emotionally to myself. I didn't actually know how emotional I was until I healed, because I was avoiding those pesky emotions. So for me, it was a two-step process, and I literally, like, within a week or two, I had walked like 3/4 of a mile, and I hadn't walked farther than just from the house to the car in probably a year. So there was a huge, like, the pain science itself gave me what I call, like, it created this place of safety for myself that I could say, oh my gosh, this is really me. But then the symptoms came back, and it wasn't like it just lasted forever. And so I realized, like, there were so many things. Like, for me, part of the process was literally going around and all the beliefs and the triggers of things that I believed. Like, I believed if I wore a belt, that would cause me back pain. I believed I had like this red, ugly couch in my den. If I sat on that couch, I would have increased pain. So there's these different triggers. If I eat certain things, I would have increased IBS issues. Like all these built up framework of what I thought was causing my symptoms had to just slowly but surely start to be undone. And I'm a person of prayer, and I would literally put my hand on my head and just like pray for healing of the neural pathway between my brain and my belt or whatever. And, but I was also using a lot of affirmations. Like, I know I'm not sick. I know I'm well. I know that this is just like a misfire in my brain. Right. So that was kind of a first step, immediate step. And then really it's kind of hard for me to point to just one thing that healed me, because it was pain science. It was working with the triggers. And then it was really being willing to dive into my story. And I know there's definitely people who heal who don't have to go into the depths of their story, but for me, I did. And it's not that I had to relive the past, actually. It's just that I needed to find ways to take the pressure valve, release the pressure valve of the emotions stored inside me. I love this. I'm a poet and creative writer, and I just think in imagery and metaphor. And I love this idea. think I made up. I mean, I say it with clients all the time, but repressed emotions that you're avoiding for a long time, it's like a champagne bottle that someone shook up and down inside you, and it's dying to become uncorked, but you're just like trying to keep it locked down, right? But the truth is, we don't have the glass edge, that boundary of a champagne bottle. We have like our bodies, and so like our skin, the internal organs, our whole nervous system, everything becomes desensitized because of holding and repressing things, locking them down inside our bodies. And what I believe brings so much healing is finding the place where we can literally visualize uncorking that pressured champagne bottle that's ready to just let loose, and find the place that we can let loose and release what we've been holding down inside for so long. For me, that was creative writing, expressive writing. Schubner's workbook has tons of expressive writing exercises in it that really helped me. But it was also like using my imagination to get inside my story. And I had like all kinds of creative writing coming out of me. I had gone through The Artist's Way, which is a program for healing creativity. And she has a practice in there called Morning Pages, where you write every morning. So I had been doing that. But I really got to the place where I was like, I don't want to do all this work alone. It's too much. It's too hard. And I think I was coming up against my own defenses. And so I reached out to an ISTDP therapist, and I started working with an ISTDP therapist, which is intensive short-term psychodynamic therapy. And it's a therapy that Sarno recommended, that Schubner recommends, and many people in this work do. And it really helped me understand my story, understand the default modes within me that were like built up around wounds, and helped me to tear down walls that I didn't even know were there. I had no idea. So that was a huge part of my journey. I mean, honestly, I took one look at the size of Schubner's workbook, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that whole thing by myself. I want to work with someone that will help me work through this. And we didn't.
He recommends you can do it alone, but you can also get one of the ISTD therapist, TDP therapists, or I know in the book he even says, unless you have like a really good friend that could try to like even walk you through it. But I don't know. I felt like it could almost, it's a really interesting approach. So I'm not sure just anyone could actually really accomplish it the same way. You'd have to have like a lot of, I think, a really strong, vulnerable willingness, like relationship with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's totally possible to do that kind of work in a coaching relationship with a counselor, and, with a close friend, it is possible. But there's a lot that when we've lived for decades avoiding certain difficult emotions, we have all the defenses like built up, right? Thick walls a lot of the time. And I honestly believe, Chaz, that for people who are struggling to heal TMS symptoms, or maybe even in your DNRS community, sometimes it's not that we have to relive every little thing that was difficult, but sometimes we need our way in to healing is through our stories. So that's I think story is really powerful, and it has a lot to teach us. Memory is really powerful. It's not a static, firm thing. Memory actually shifts and changes, and sometimes all we need is to just understand what really happened instead of remembering the way we thought it did. And that a lot of times for me is like listening to the deeper places within us, what's going on and what our inner child or younger self really experienced, instead of just, making it look pretty because we didn't have a place to actually process those hurts. Right. Yeah. And so did you actually then, you found an ISTDP therapist, and do you actually go through that book? I went through a lot of it, but so I'm a creative, and I just don't, I follow my intuition and my gut a lot in my life in general. And I had no idea how intuitively I was led until I healed. But so for me, yes, I worked through the book, but what was even more powerful was actually following my own creative writing. And I had wild dreams and crazy experiences in my writing that, like, the only way I can describe it, it was like my subconscious was coming to me and telling me what it was really like through my writing, which I know sounds wild, but that's just how I can describe it. Some of that writing, actually a lot of that writing I hope to put out into the world someday. But it's really through the power of imagination and metaphor that I continued my journey. So the Schubinner's book really got me started, and his expressive writing was huge for me to see the release that I could have, like literally experience physical release of anxiety or symptoms in my body after writing. It was like teaching me what works for me. So yeah, that's where I went through. And honestly, like, I had this explosion of poetry that came out of me. I had no idea that I was a poet, or that I had written some poems over the years, but I wouldn't have just defined myself as a poet. And in my healing, like, it's a huge part of my healing was literally like a way that I popped the cork off of the champagne bottle that's pressurized inside of myself was through poetry. And through other creative writing. So I'm not a one size, that's why I believe so much, and there's not a one size fits all road to recovering, but it's really learning to listen deeply to yourself, to your body, and to your story. And I will say, like, now in coaching, I definitely encourage people to use expressive writing and looking into their story and their symptom timeline and those kinds of tools that are really helpful. But for some people, like, the way in is actually the somatic practices, right? Like somatic tracking and mindfulness meditation and breathing exercises. And for me, I had such a broken relationship with my body that I couldn't go straight to trying to connect with my body. I really needed, like, the opening to connect with my story first and then get to my body. I don't know if that makes sense, but
100%. Yeah, because that's the whole thing. And we were talking about offline, is we all have different stories leading up to the point that we begin our healing journey. And, we all have different traumas, and then we all have different nervous systems that have different perceptions of everything in life. And we have different relationships with our bodies and different minds. So yeah, some people need, there's some people, I think some people might really benefit from having some emotional release before they do something different and are ready for that next step, versus other people might need to first go into the somatics before their nervous system is calm enough to maybe approach some of the other deeper things. So It's just, yeah. And something I was going to say too is it's really common in the healing community for people, as they're getting further along in their healing journey, to realize how incredibly intuitive we all are, right? But it can get so, when you think about it, as children, we're so often taught to not use our intuition. We're taught to think, we're taught to, there's something that intuitively doesn't feel right or good for us, but we're forced to do it anyways. We're taught, if you don't do this thing or you did that, even though it was intuitive and natural for us as a child, we're taught we're bad or wrong. So I feel almost like all the pain and all that is just really, it's a reminder. Like somebody said once, pain is an indication of how far away from yourself you have gotten, how far away from your soul. And so as you're healing, you're kind of peeling layers of conditioning, and you're getting back to who you actually are at your root. You're remembering your soul, and you're going to become hopefully more intuitive, and hopefully then as time goes on, you can use that intuition then, like you said, to help guide you as you continue in the healing journey.
Yeah, that resonates so much with me. I absolutely agree with that. And, to be honest, I thought I was the most emotionally in touch and aware person before I healed. So like, it didn't resonate that I was out of touch with myself or my deeper intuition. But what I know now is that for me, and I think for a lot of us with the TMS symptoms, um, difficult life experiences or stressful experience traumas, right? Those things keep us basically spinning out into all of the personality types that are really typical of TMS, like perfectionism, people pleasing, needing to be in control, always being good, always being for the other, and leaving ourselves last. Like those personality traits, for me, I look on it. I mean, I was a huge perfectionistic and control freak. I mean, huge before I healed. And I had a real shift within me when I did heal, where like I didn't need to be on time as much as I used to. I could let my husband do things that before I would not let him do because I was too freaked out about it being done right. Like there was a big shift, and I look back and I think, oh, like for the way that I think about that shift and that why it was there for me was I was on the run my entire life from these deep wounds. And when you've got those emotions, just don't dissolve, like they are powerful in you. And when you're on the run from that, like you've got to keep it pushed down, and that takes control, perfectionism, pleasing others. Like it takes all of the traits, right, to keep it pushed down and keep that distance from yourself,
Right.
that part of yourself and your story. So it's kind of the way
Totally.
I think about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Another interesting thing too that you brought up was the creativity, like how you didn't even realize how creative you were. And I know something else I've learned is that that's actually also a really normal thing, because generally if you're in chronic pain or you have a chronic illness and you're in this like kind of chronic state of dysregulation in your nervous system, there's a high chance that you probably also have an impaired limbic system, which is kind of the premise of the brain rewiring programs. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because actually a limbic impairment actually can stunt and inhibit your access to your natural creative. And so that's the other thing I see happen a lot is people, as they begin to repair and rewire their limbic system, it's like, oh my gosh, there's all these like openings for creative outlets and creative expression that shine through, which then often I see also becomes a catalyst in the healing.
Exactly. That's it right there. You didn't know what you had, and it starts to show itself, and then it helps you heal. It's the thing that continues you on the journey. And for me, creativity was definitely something. I was creative and expressive that way all of my life. And I had all these different ways that I would express that. And yet, creative writing was too risky for me. And so it's interesting to me that like I knew I was creative, and I knew I like deeply valued those who express themselves through creativity, but I didn't know I had it in me in the way I did. So it was like news to me that the depths of what was coming out, right, was it was really powerful for me in my healing, but also in knowing that like this is my true self. This is what, in my coach training, my life coach training, like we talk a lot about deep listening to your life and to your truer self. And like, there's this whole framework of like listening to you can go from the more surface level of like behaviors through your emotions into your thoughts. And then the deeper levels of like beliefs and identity, spirituality and purpose, like that flow of those are like 6 levels of listening that Robert Dilts has written and put out into the world. And those like this TMS healing, it's not just about healing the pain. It really is, and the symptoms that you experience in your body, it really is about reconnecting with your truer self. And that's literally why I'm a life coach and not a therapist, or I considered a lot of different approaches. And I feel like for me, I'm most passionate about teaching and coaching so that we can learn who we are in our deeper selves. And that also, I believe, is a way into healing. So, yeah.
Absolutely. They kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
for people who are listening who don't have an experience with the journaling or really like the TMS healing and all that, you kind of talked about like creative writing and expressive writing. Could you explain for anyone listening what you mean by creative and expressive writing that worked for you? Because I'm sure some people might not really have an idea of what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll speak to expressive writing first. So for me, I really learned that initially through Schuberner's book, Unlearn Your Pain. And then there's also a book that I purchased after working with his workbook called Expressive Writing Words That Heal by Pennebaker and Evans. And they have a program that literally uses expressive writing to help people heal from depression, anxiety, and other physical symptoms as well. So the expressive writing, the goal, and it's very, if you're familiar with Nicole Sachs' journal speak, I would say the way that she encourages people to write is definitely a way to do expressive writing. So that's a super quick answer, but the details of it is like, you decide on a topic or a situation. You can list out like a few stressful things in your life that you think could be contributing to the symptoms you experience in your body. And then you really just sit down and you use it as an exercise. You set a timer for 20 minutes. You take that topic and you just say, I'm going to try to put on the page what I really feel about this, leaving behind any self-judgment. There's no spelling or sentence structure or anything that's traditional in good writing. It's literal stream of consciousness that's trying to not just be present to like this happened, this happened, this happened as far as like the circumstances, but it's sinking into that deeper place of like, what was I feeling when this happened in my life? What was I experiencing that I couldn't actually be present to myself, or the people around me couldn't receive or listen to what I was experiencing? Because so often the younger version of ourselves is just feeling unheard, and for one reason or another wasn't able to process the pain that they had experienced. And that could be from childhood or early adulthood or even recent years, right? It's distant past and it's current life. And so you can follow that, and trying to answer, how did I feel then and how do I feel now about it? And your goal truly is to express yourself accurately, to follow whatever nudge or whatever memory that pops up without any judgment, with full acceptance, knowing that whatever is coming out needs to be heard. So I love the idea that pain and physical symptoms in the body are there because they're telling us something. They have a message for us. And I believe difficult emotions have the same thing. There's a message for us. And we're the only ones who can find it. No one can uncover that for us. And so expressive writing is that place where we get to start to uncover it. And it can be a lot of work and it can be triggering. And so that's why I really encourage people to just set a timer and say, okay, I'm doing this for 10 minutes and then I'm going to walk away. And I can chuck it across the room if I want to, and I'll walk away. Or, 20 minutes or whatever. And you do it a few times a week. And just kind of taking steps to really see what's the truth of what's going on in my body? What's the truth of my experiences, inside my experiences and the emotions that I've, know are there, or maybe ones that I don't. And so we kind of it's a place to surrender and to start to discover what's true. That's the way I describe it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So you use that, you got the ISTDP therapist. How long did you work with the therapist on that process?
We worked for a solid year together, like every week. And then the second year, I think we worked probably about 8 months out of the second year. So it was almost a 2-year experience. And honestly, yeah, ISTDP is supposed to be short term. It's in the title. But for me, I had a lot to work through, and it was just my timing, right? So I would definitely encourage anyone who's starting this work, if they're like just a few months in or even a year in, and they're like, I'm not making progress. Like sometimes we need time. We need to give ourselves the space and time to heal and, follow what's working, discover what works for us and what doesn't. And for me, definitely I use breathing techniques, meditations, a little bit of somatic tracking. Those tools came in to play after I'd already had an initial healing, and I used the Curable app some, and so there was definitely a lot of different tools in place for me that was helping me to continue. It's like, I was healed and healing. You get to heal and then keep on healing, and that's what I still do today.
That's awesome. So you used all these other tools, kind of like you had said, intuitively as needed, depending on what felt right or what you felt like you needed to support yourself in each given day or moment.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, Chaz, for one reason, the main reason I did is because when I first healed, I had heap loads of anxiety coming up. And I never really experienced anxiety in my life very much, except for when I was in my teens or early 20s. And so I was like, what the heck? How do I deal with all this anxiety? I feel like I'm kind of going crazy here. And so I really did need those things to help me learn how to orient myself in a way that was going to calm my nervous system. And now that pain wasn't covering over the anxiety, then I could then start to be present to what was inside the anxiety, which was often, deeper emotions like rage or fear or grief or loss, those kinds of things.
Yes, I love that explanation. And because I know this can be a common thing, and where like the pain and the illness starts to lift, and then people have this other type of anxiety. And another way, like I've kind of interpreted it or understood it, is, oh, okay, so there's this nervous system, and I think of myself, my nervous system, my like natural state for so long was a certain way, like pain or illness or just being like a type A, being in a rush, like this certain way. And as I start peeling back these layers and start kind of falling into this different rhythm, it's very different and not familiar to the nervous system. So the nervous system is like kind of goes through this little freak out mode where it's like, okay, this feels really foreign. This feels really different. I'm not sure that this is safe, So then you use these tools to be like, oh no, it's okay. We're safe. This is going to be our new normal. Like we're okay.
Exactly. And looking for that to me is key, creating safety for ourselves. Safety for our emotions, our bodies, our nervous system. And that, like, expressive writing is just one environment to create safety or creative expression. A key thing for me now, and I would say probably a year or so after healing, was doing movement, like nurturing body movement, like yoga or walking, like the breathing exercises, the VU breath or the regulating breath. Even like body shaking or car screaming. I don't know if you've heard of those too, but like there's some that Peter Levine teach, and it really does help you like just shed this excess emotion and stress that you tend to hold on to, right? So you look for anything that's going to help you like release. So
yeah, I think what I like about it the most too, like where I'm at right now, because I'm still healing through physical sensations, is more now than ever. I'm like, I love how aware I'm becoming in this relationship I have with all these parts, like with my nervous system, with my body, with my inner child. And I love how I'm just starting to notice and be so much more aware of where am I at right now? How am I dysregulated? And what do I actually really need, rather than just trying to like judge it or be afraid of it or run from it or resist it. It's like just getting super familiar with where am I at right now and what do I need? And I don't know. I love that, that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's like this commitment to deeply listening to yourself and being present. what you're
Yeah.
experiencing. Yeah.
And then like, if you look at it like the little inner child, you're like, hey, I just want you to know that like, I wasn't always like aware, and I wasn't always, paying attention, but I'm here now and I'm paying attention, and I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm learning every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question, kind of backtrack a little. You were talking about becoming really aware of triggers that created. Now I know there's different types of triggers. We could talk a load of emotional triggers, like situations that trigger you or like trigger an emotion within you. And I know we use writing and other tools. And I'm sure the ISTDP really helped you unpack a lot of the emotional triggers, because they all just stem from some part of us that is unhealed. But as far as like the physical type triggers, like your red couch or a belt causing back pain, I know that you were becoming aware of these triggers, and then you said I had affirmations or reminded myself, but how else do you feel like really supported you reframing around triggers and creating new neural pathways and unlearning old associations that did not support you?
Right. So I have in my course, How We Heal Chronic Pain and Fatigue, I have a class on triggers, and really what's so important around starting trigger work is, one, to create the safe place for yourself first. And that might be, like I said, like in the pain science or in some of the practices and tools, but it doesn't help to enter a trigger like a bull in a china shop. Like, I'm going to conquer this thing. Here I go. I'm pushing myself and I'm not backing down until I get it right. Okay, no. So for me, like, what's helpful is to go towards a trigger with a lot of kindness and with the pace that's going to work for my own system. And where we go into a trigger, and like, I like to call, like, you take the low hanging fruit first. So like the easier ones that don't feel like the very middle of our difficulty, but maybe just like a little small one, we can go, oh yeah, I see that association. Okay, let's start there. So it's really being gentle with yourself and going into those places as you feel led, but it's just completely necessary to move forward only when fear doesn't have the loudest voice, to be able to move forward. Because if we're going forward into a trigger, let's say, this is a very physical one, but like whenever you bend over to reach down to this like back part of your kitchen cabinet, you always get shooting pain in your back or buttocks or whatever. So you have this learned thing that if you go there in that one physical space, like, we're very physical beings. Like, a lot of times the triggers are established in in our home environments and in our lives, in our physical environments. So I would only start to go towards a trigger like that until I know, like, okay, I know that I'm safe to bend over and reach back that way. I know in the past it's been like this, but I know now I'm creating a new opening and a new understanding of what will actually happen when I do. And so you're using that, you're giving yourself that buffer of creating the safety around it before you enter in. And if fear happens to like spike up, completely get bigger than your own affirmation or will to try it, then you stop trying to engage with the trigger and you try to address the fear first. And that is a direct teaching from Schubiner, the course that I trained with him in. I mean, that's what he talks about as you try to re-engage and with your life and your normal activities, but you do it in a titrated way that's going to account for your nervous system. And when you bump up to like heap loads of fear, maybe that's not the best place to start. Maybe try one that's a little bit easier, like a little easier way in, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was your most challenging trigger to overcome, and what do you feel was the catalyst to help you overcome it, for anyone listening who's got a load of triggers they're working through?
Oh my gosh, that's a really great question. The thing that I think immediately is it's an emotional trigger. not a physical one, but well, I would say I have an answer for both physical and emotional.
Let's do it. Honestly, this is my first episode to really go in deep with this stuff. So let's do it.
Okay. So I would say the hardest one for me in addressing physical triggers was food. So I avoided dairy, sugar, gluten all my life practically. I did all the things and people said it was your diet. And so I changed my diet. So I basically ate like similar to a paleo diet for so many years. And I had a huge amount of fear around eating certain foods. And honestly, it wasn't until like this past year that I started to calm that down. Now, I've been pain-free since 2017, but it wasn't until 2020 that I started directly dealing with the food. So I would say that was my strongest association. Like, if I eat this, this will happen. If I eat this, my mouth will itch. If I eat this, my stomach will bloat. Like, super strong correlations between food and what was going to happen in the body. I had an immense fear around sugar and around gluten. Like, ask my family. I was super intense. I was like, don't you dare put that knife in the almond butter if you just spread it on bread. Are you kidding me? You're going to contaminate me. Like, that kind of intensity around gluten. And because I had that strong belief that it didn't just cause bloating or stomach upset with IBS kind of symptoms, but that it contributed to fatigue. It contributed to my whole system feeling run down. It contributed, all those beliefs. So that was definitely the strongest trigger. And what really helped, this is not going to help your audience broadly, but what really helped me was preparing to teach on triggers. Literally in my class, I was like, oh my gosh, Michelle, I believe all of this. And so I know that I have the power. If I have the power to go from debilitating pain where I could barely walk and needed to get a wheelchair, I have the power to heal my associations around food. But, food is a little bit more nebulous. It's not as black and white. It's kind of like healing fatigue. It's kind of this general thing, and it's a little bit harder to hold than my foot hurts or my back hurts. So I don't know that I'm giving you a real clear, how I directly healed it, but it was almost for me, I couldn't address all the symptoms all at once. I needed to take it in phases.
And so what did you do? When you had this realization that now you have the power to heal and reframe around gluten, what steps did you take? A couple big things that helped.
Yeah. Well, one was definitely calming fear around it, realizing I had this pretty powerful conversation with my husband where he was like, yeah, you didn't realize you have so much fear around food. And I was like, well, kind of, but I don't know. So for me, he helped me see how intensely I had interpreted my experience of food and just the intense fear I had around it. So that's why I avoided it for so long. So for one, it was to be present to the fear I had with that particular trigger. And then it was to move forward slowly. So when I first added these foods back in, I was like, oh my gosh, dairy, gluten, sugar, all the things. And I went too much too fast. And my system didn't like that at all. And so it was literally taking slower steps and still eating in the way that works for my metabolism and body, but doing it in a way that I no longer feel like I can't ever eat a little bit of a piece of bread or, a cracker or whatever. So it's not like I had real clear tools. It was just one, dealing with the fear first, two, dealing with that in a slow titrated way. For me, somatic tracking is something that I love. I think being present to a symptom in my body, this came out through somatic tracking and through talking with my therapist, where I really had no idea how much anxiety was definitely living in my gut. And so whenever I had bloating or a stomach ache, or literally sometimes felt like a brick wall in my stomach, I was like, oh, it's food. But it was working through my emotional and life experiences where I realized, oh my gosh, that's just 100% anxiety. almost 100% of the time. And so for me to learn where emotion lives in my body, like I hold anxiety in my gut. I think that's a really common thing that many of us do. And so just to really be present to that in the circumstances I was dealing with in my regular life helped me release, like, oh, okay, I thought it was gluten, dairy, sugar, all these things. But really, this is emotion showing up in my physical body. So it was making that connection too.
Totally. And so now that's the first step, is being consciously aware that I'm consciously aware now that this is what's actually going on and it's not said food. So how did you actually reprogram like new neural pathways to support your brain to now at a subconscious level know that food? Because I know like something we do with brain retraining is we do what we call incremental training, which is where we do small bouts of exposure to something and we pair it with a conscious like action or conscious choice to create a different physiological, immediate physiological response. Like maybe I expose myself to a certain trigger, and immediately after that, I do a little visualization where I'm really bringing myself into a state of joy or gratitude so that I'm pairing this positive emotion with the trigger over and over and over again.
Yeah, that actually sounds similar to something that I do with clients. I don't know if I particularly did it with myself, but I definitely think that establishing safety through the calming, regulating breath, moving into being present to the physical symptom without fear, and that's what somatic tracking does. And I like to incorporate imagination within it. So I myself or clients use like metaphor to picture like putting myself in a real a place of safety and a beautiful environment that's life-giving. Like, for me, it would be I'm in the middle of the woods and I'm watching birds and I'm with my husband or even alone. And so, it's having that location of safety and then bringing that sense of feeling into the physical experience.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, this is something that like Schubiner definitely has trained me in graded exposure through his class. So that's what we call it in the TMS world, is graded exposure. So where you first use your imagination, you imagine let's say eating the piece of bread, and then you follow that and see how your body responds. So if you have a physical reaction to imagining doing the trigger, that's a neural pathway. But literally the conscious mind always overrides the subconscious mind. So if I can then, work with that being triggered in my imagination, or being triggered by looking at a picture of what triggers me, and if I'm able to calm that fear response and create safety through the imagination and through a picture, then I'm ready just to actually do the triggering activity, whatever if it's eating a small piece of bread or whatever, because I've already created safety and taught my brain this is a safe experience, this is a safe activity, and you go in with it having all the tools that you already know. You have the ability to calm yourself, to bring yourself back to peace, and that might be through breathing, through somatic tracking type of approach, or through the imagination and imagining that like safe space, actual location, or maybe it's just a feeling, inside of a feeling.
Yes, I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's awesome. Imagination is huge. Okay, so now I have another question, because I had to like write that one down. You said you just started actually about a year ago, really digging into the food triggers, but that you were basically pain-free in 2017. But you said also that 2017 was when you got your last diagnosis of POTS, and that's when your health twin contacted you. So you had that rapid of a recovery of the physical manifestations?
I did. I had a very rapid recovery. of the physical manifestations. And then they came back like with a, like, you know, I had like a very quick response physically. And in fact, I'll never forget the summer of 2017. I remember visiting family in North Carolina, and we were at the beach. And I just remember going through this like, oh my gosh, I've always had to sit on the sidelines in my life. I've never been allowed to do the things because I would hurt myself or whatever. And so I can remember, like, out of habit, sheer habit, sitting on the beach, eating a snack, reading a book, watching my kids swim. And I was like, what the heck am I doing? I'm going swimming. I'm going to get in the ocean. It's something I wouldn't have done before because of the pain levels that I experienced. So I got in the ocean, and you should have seen the looks on my kids' faces. They were like, Mama, can you do this? Are you okay? Are you going to hurt yourself? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm free. And I'm like jumping around and swimming and diving in the water. And so for me, like, this physical engagement, like, I heard Shubiner say, re-engage with your life physically. And I was like, okay. And so it doesn't mean that I didn't ever have things come up, but when I had them come up, for me, I was experiencing something stressful that made me angry. Like, that was my emotional trigger. I told you I had a physical trigger. The emotional trigger for me was anger. So whenever I felt anger, that was the thing I avoided for so long and had shoved down deep within me. So whenever I got angry at my husband for maybe a no big deal thing, or one of my kids, or even at myself, I would get physical symptoms. And I'm like, what the heck? And I knew the physical symptom by then, but I didn't know yet why I was getting the physical symptom until I started to listen. What was going on with me in my life right now? What's going on relationally, or in my work, or in my family life, right? And so it took me a long time to learn this pattern of like, oh, when I feel angry in this part of my body, or when I feel pain in this part of my body, I know that's anger. And sometimes it's like, I have different parts of my body that are like different people in my life. So like, I know, and that might sound crazy, but I know that I experience emotion of certain types in different areas of my body. And so in some ways it's like I created a map of my body and the symptoms that I experienced, and learned to like part of my healing and then continuing to heal is to really understand where I tend to carry things. And it just helps you reverse a symptom like so much faster when you can identify that. And not everyone, I'm sure, works that way, but it definitely is how I work.
That's awesome. If there's ever any good definition or explanation of freedom, how is that, you know? I would feel pretty free if I could be like, I have this level of awareness.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that also. Okay. Gosh, there's like, I think I could just unpack things for hours with you. I'm like, we're already almost at an hour here, and I haven't gotten through even a fraction of my questions. Not uncommon. So I wanted to ask you, okay, so just going to recap a little for everyone listening. You learned about Dr. Shubiner, Unlearn Your Pain. You unpacked a bunch of stuff. You had a quick release of physical symptoms. And, you know, we obviously know they can come and go because healing is not always linear. You worked through triggers. Expressive writing was a really powerful tool for you, as well as doing the ISTDP therapy. And then the other thing you were talking about was, as you're healing, you're also tapping into that creative nature that you didn't really know you had, and you're doing a lot of creative writing. And so I guess that's where I want to shift for, I guess, the final part of what we're going to talk about is I want to really get into the creative role and how the creative role in your healing. So the kind of that circular relationship where the healing brought out the creativity, and then the creativity brought more healing. So I'd love if we could kind of circle back and just talk about some of that for people who are listening, and kind of give some tips and tricks how people could tap into their creative energy to also assist in the process?
Oh, I love this question.
Oh, yeah, you're glad.
I mean, I love all of this work, but you've just nailed my favorite thing. The way that I healed revealed to me in my experience that our deep creativity, or creativity period, comes from the deep well within us. And when we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, on the run from difficult life experiences or traumas, those emotions are pushed down in the same place. Like, I literally, in my imagination, I have this really early poem that I wrote. It's actually still not finished. Like, I wrote it, but then I didn't ever completely feel satisfied with where it was. But in it, I described that there's this box down inside me. And there was all these screaming voices, don't open the box, don't go there, keep it shut, keep it locked down. And I was like, no, I've got to open this box. And I would say, this is a very imaginative way of saying it, but when I opened that box, in my healing journey, creativity and repressed emotion was just hanging out together. I mean, I can't separate them. Like, they were in the same deep inner well. And so when I referred to the Artist's Way book by Julia Cameron, and her book really describes healing the inner creative in a way that's like being present to this deeper self. And the tool that she really uses with creatives is to do morning pages, because morning pages is this expressive writing. It's a creative writing. Well, it's really kind of like journaling, but where you're taking off the top layer of your busyness. Like, you just show up and you write. And you write and write for 3 pages, and then you're done. And the way I see that is you're skimming off the top layer of yourself in order to access the deeper places. When I did that practice, I mean, I did it every morning, and the more I did it, the more my creativity showed up in the same space with me. And the more my creativity showed up, the more like these wounded places showed up too. And so it was kind of this like beautiful, messy experience where I tell people I have this chair in my room, my bedroom, that I still have the same chair. Like, it's the chair I healed in. That's what I say, because I healed through that writing practice. And so for me, following creativity, it takes a kind of surrender. Like, when I write a poem, I can write the first line of a poem and I have no idea where that poem's going to lead me. And if I'm going to tell a poem what I want it to be, I just don't think that's a good approach to expressing yourself creatively. I really believe that creativity is a powerful force within us, and it has a plan for us, and we follow it. We get to surrender to it. So for me, like, healing my chronic pain and chronic symptoms was very interwoven with surrendering to the creative process, just in the same way that creativity taught me to be present to myself. And I would just add in, like, my spirituality and prayer just taught me to be present to God within me. Like, those things cultivated this habit of being present to myself, and surrendering in the areas that I needed to heal in. So this is, like, for me, waking up early and doing morning pages. It's something that Julia Cameron suggests for all creatives, not just someone who's a writer or a poet or whatever. If, whatever discipline you happen to have, she says we all need to have the busy noise of life skimmed off the surface so we can at least listen to what's deeper within us. And that's where creativity comes from. I'm convinced, and just stop me if I need to be done with speaking on this question, but I'm honestly convinced that us as adults, for those of us who say, oh, I'm not creative, every child is creative. Every child is convinced that the artwork that they drew for a parent or a guardian, that is just like absolutely gorgeous and amazing because they know they've expressed themselves truly. So inside creativity, there's freedom to be the child self, to be the expressive self, to be set free to like let whatever comes. And it literally, trying to work within a discipline of creativity, at least for me in poetry, like it helped me say, okay, I don't have to have it all figured out before I start. That's what a poem is. And I mean, I do my business this way. I don't have to have my business as a coach and as a teacher of mind-body courses all figured out and perfected before I begin. I completely believe in the creative process in our lives helps set us free to be who we really are. And then that helps us shed perfectionism and people pleasing and all of those things. So to me, like getting in touch with the deeper creative self, you're getting in touch with the same place within you that could be a little, on the run from, that you could be on the run from. And it's a powerful dynamic. It has so much ability to teach us how to surrender, how to trust, to teach us how to surrender, and to teach us how to follow. And those are like a mantra for me. Trust, surrender, follow is something that I repeat, that I pray, and it's, I think, a key to my own healing, for sure.
That's beautiful. Trust, surrender, and follow.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you like to share a poem?
Sure, I can read a poem. So this is one that I thought of as I was preparing to meet with you, Chaz. And I wrote this in January of 2019. So this is like I healed in April of 2017. So this was almost 2 years after I healed. But this was in the phase of my healing where I was trying to figure out how to live life with anxiety showing up in my body a lot. And it wasn't necessarily in the same ways that it used to, but it was in new ways. And it was, I'll just leave it there. So this is called In the Window. Even here in this hotel room, I pull back the layers of drapes, pushing the chair over to the window to drink in the light and listen. I watch the cars race through traffic lights below, and soon I know I'll be on that road. But first I stop to sense each part of my body, to see if my toes are digging into the soles of my furry boots, if I'm clenching my teeth together, or holding in more breaths than I am exhaling. My eyelids tap out their anxious dance, reminding me I've been through years of chronic pain, desperate not to return to that way again. Maybe I need them to twitch for the rest of my life, to remember to open myself to this light passing through glass, how I need the space to breathe, to remind myself I am safe and loved, that I am here, taking in one strong breath, releasing it back into the room, where the hum of the refrigerator tells me that even when I pause, the world will keep going.
Wow, that is beautiful. I just closed my eyes and just allowed myself to really be with that poem, and I really related to it in so many different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with all of us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Michelle, where can people connect with you or read more of your poetry, or how can they get in touch with you if they feel really drawn to the work you're doing and your style of coaching, or if they just feel drawn to you and want to learn more about what coaching you offer?
Sure. So there's 2 different locations to do that. One, my website, Michelle Wiegers, which is Wiegers, so Michelle, and then Wiegers.com. So on MichelleWiegers.com, I have a few poems that have been published that you can read there. I don't have a lot of poetry online, but I hope that will change in the coming year. I have a lot more that just lives in my notebook and my Google Drive. But So that's one way to connect with me. And I offer coaching individually, group coaching, and I'm partnering and collaborating. Well, I've done 2 rounds of a TMS course that meets remotely. I started this past fall teaching by myself, and now I'm collaborating with Rebecca Tolan. Our course starts at the end of January, and I have another collaboration with another mind body coach, Jill Pratt, and we're starting the beginning of February. I'm convinced that healing in community is so much more fun and oftentimes more powerful than healing alone. And so I'm taking that, and I guess this is the first time I'm sharing about this, but I'm creating an online mind-body healing community for healing inside of this TMS approach and healing inside of creativity called howweheal.us. So it's a website that's going to be an online community where people can connect with one another, take courses. And it's a free community. So anyone can register to get access to that. There's going to be meditation experiences. There's going to be courses, webinars, discussion groups. And it's really just one hub, one place where we can get to know each other and heal alongside of one another. So howweheal.us, I'd love for people to check it out. It's not launched quite yet, but it's in the works. And it's a way that I would love for your listeners to find what's going to help them on their journey. And it's not something that I'm doing alone. It's going to be a collaboration with a lot of other mind, body, and creative writing people. So I'm excited. That's my big, huge effort. That's new in 2021. So
congratulations. Yeah. That's awesome. I can't wait for it to launch.
Thanks.
I'm glad that I got to be the first person or, the first platform you're sharing it with.
Yeah, I haven't put it out there anywhere. I think I've told one client. That's about it.
Wow. When do you think it will be launched? An idea?
So I'm creating my 2 courses that are coming up are both housed there. So we're working right now with anyone who's in those courses will actually start to access the online community right away. But within, I would say, the next month, I still have some writing that I want to do to describe what it is and what we're doing there and the intention, and lots of meetings with potential collaborators. But there's a lot of people excited about joining me in this effort, and I'm super thrilled. And I feel like my intention so much is to bring this howweheal.us to people who are wanting to heal. So many mind body practitioners have different focuses that I just want to bring a conglomeration of tools that's just going to bring it directly to those who need it most. And yeah, so there's going to be a lot there. But no, I don't have a set date yet. Maybe I should soon.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Like you said, you don't have to have it all figured out.
No.
Yeah.
I'm following this journey. It's so true.
And I love it because I feel like, that so much aligns to my mission, right? You're creating an actual website for an actual community to come together. But I'm also for me, this platform, this podcast is to bring all the tools into this podcast, into this show, and to also, in a sense, then create this, network or community of information to help whoever finds this podcast and the listeners to have access to all these different modalities and to be inspired to tap into their, their intuitive side to find what really resonates with them. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. I'm so glad you have this podcast, and I'm sure you're reaching so many people, giving them hope through it. It's such a great platform. So
now we have a website that I can even direct them to stay connected, which is going to be awesome.
Very cool.
Okay, so I would say I'd love to respect your time and the listeners, but I do want to ask you one more final question. Mm-hmm. If you had one piece of advice or just one message that you wanted to share with anyone out there who's listening, no matter where they're at in their journey, what would you say?
I think I'd summarize it with my personal mantra that I'd shared before, that prayer that I pray, to trust the process, that it's yours, that you can surrender to what comes, and to knowing that whatever comes is your teacher and your guide, and that you can follow your heart, your intuition, your body, and you truly have the power within you to step into that which will help you heal. And so trusting, surrendering, following. I think that's what I'd leave you with.
I love it. And I love that you added, we have the power within.
True. Yes.
All right, Michelle. Thank you so much. I will make sure that I drop links in the show notes for all of this great stuff and all the ways that people can connect with you and explore the different options they have for private and group and your collaborations.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Chaz. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, self-healers, that's a wrap. And as a reminder, please consider leaving that review on Apple Podcasts or sharing this episode with a friend. And if you have a story that you would like to share, please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you, and I am sure all the listeners would also love to hear from you. Have fun in the mirror, loving on yourself, and until next time, make this week great.